Hey people, welcome to the podcast. Joshua Fields Milburn and Ryan Nicodemus, aka the Minimalists, are in the house dropping truths on how to live better with less. I love these guys. I've known them for years. So much respect for their mission, their work, empowering millions of people all over the world. This conversation is stellar, potentially even life-altering. So with that being said, hit the subscribe button and enjoy. What's up, guys?
What's up?
This is a long time in the making.
Yeah.
It's good to have you here. Great to see both of you.
Good to be had.
Joshua's hair is looking perfect as always.
Always.
You know, Joshua gets a lot of attention for his hair and this whole Christopher Walken thing, but not enough attention is paid to your hair, Ryan. You have excellent hair. I'm sort of in between today. You guys. I cut my hair. I had long hair like yours, but you're looking fabulous today.
Thanks,
as well.
man. That, I felt like I was having a bad hair day today, so that really uplifts my spirit.
No,
so
it's all good, much, man. It's all good. People who've been on this podcast journey for a while will likely remember a podcast that I did with Joshua way back in the day. But Ryan, this is your first time here. So
I was boycotting you at the time. But
I don't know what was going on between us, but we worked it out. You guys have been gracious enough to host me on your show several times. And I'm delighted to have you here on the eve of your new documentary coming out. It's exciting, so man.
Yeah. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, it's cool.
To be here too, man.
Your story is well told, but I think it would be good to at least contextualize everything we're going to talk about by sharing your personal stories, and also in particular, Ryan, since yours, you haven't had an opportunity to share yours here. So how do we launch into that? What's the best place to start? Should we start at the beginning with you guys?
1981. I'll set
fifth grade, best friends.
I think we should start with
two
Josh.
pudgy kids sitting in the corner.
Yeah, exactly.
Plotting world domination.
That's not far from the truth. Except the world domination part. It was more like
you're working
the
your way
suburbs
towards
of Dayton domination.
Right.
And
we're working our way towards it.
How many kids from Dayton have documentaries on Netflix?
I mean, the Wright brothers.
Yeah.
Brothers. Okay. All right. So there's them.
Who's the other Martin Sheen? He is from
I don't think it's a doc though.
No, he might be in a documentary.
Right.
Here's where we start. I think I'll tee it up. So Ryan and I grew up really poor in Dayton, Ohio. We've known each other, as you said, since we were fat little fifth graders, and literally, I was the fattest kid in school. Ryan was the second fattest.
It's so
kid
hard to
in
believe,
school.
but when you watch the documentary, you're like, "Wow, he was telling the truth."
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it was impressive or depressive. Anyway, we knew each other. We grew up really poor, dysfunctional homes before that term dysfunctional was in vogue, and we were pretty discontented growing up. And of course, we thought, well, how do we become happy? And of course, that was make money. And so we climbed the corporate ladder throughout our 20s and had ostensibly successful careers. But of course, we weren't successful. We were overwhelmed and stressed and sort of discontented by the lives we created. And what's fascinating now, Ryan, is the life we were living growing up. It was so chaotic. But we traded that chaos just for a different type of chaos. Controlled chaos is still chaos, right? In fact, it's an oxymoron. And so, yeah, we were working in corporate America, making really good money, spending even better money, and so had massive amounts of debt, and knew we needed to make a change.
Yeah, I mean, you both grew up in alcoholic households, essentially, right?
Yeah.
Food stamps, poverty.
Yeah.
So it's not surprising that you would seek out security and, an upward kind of financially secure trajectory. I mean, that's what, most people would do trying to emerge out of a situation like that.
Yeah. I remember working for my dad just out of high school. He just had like a small painting and wallpaper company, and he worked his butt off, and like he made nothing. And now I was there working my butt off, making nothing, and I'm like, I know there's a way I can work just as hard, but make more money. And that's when I went into telecom with Josh, and yeah, like he said, I started making really awesome money, and I thought, oh, I figured it out. I finally figured it out. I remember, because even during like high school, I worked for my dad, painting and hanging wallpaper. And I remember early on when I was working for him, we were in this really nice house. It wasn't like a mansion or anything, but it was like something nicer than my mom or dad had ever owned. And I looked at my dad, I'm like, this is a really nice place, man. Like, how much do I need to make in order to live here? And he's like, if you can make $50,000 a year, you could probably afford a place like this. So for me, that was like, yeah, that was the number for happiness. It was 50 grand a year. And when I went to the telecom company, I think that very first year I made like 52,000 or something. And I was really proud of myself and like happy that I was making more money. I went out and like, bought a new truck. I guess it wasn't technically mine because like, I got a loan on got a car payment basically. But I wasn't happy. And I realized why I wasn't happy. It was because I didn't adjust for inflation. The 50,000 number had grown a little bit. So I'm like, oh, maybe it's 60,000, maybe it's 80,000, maybe it's six figures, or maybe it's just owning a bunch of stuff. So yeah, that's what I pursued. But I mean, my story really with minimalism, it kind of starts with Josh, because when we were in the corporate world, we were miserable. We had accumulated so many different burdens, like whether it's debt or whether it's, an overabundance of clutter, whether it was, chasing a job title. I mean, it was very, very depressing.
Right.
But I noticed Josh, who started being a little bit less depressed. And that's when I went to him and I asked him, like, hey, man, what are you doing that's making you so happy? Why the hell are you so happy?
Right.
And that's when he introduced this thing called minimalism.
Well, walk me up to the point of this epiphany, Joshua, because I think it's important to understand the inflection point that, introduced you to this new way of living.
Sure. Yeah. My mom died, my marriage ended both in the same month. So it was like sort of this double car crash, right? It's like you get hit by one thing and then it swerves you into this other thing. And at the same time, my corporate career, I was really discontented by it. I was managing 150 retail stores, which I know is ironic with the whole minimalism thing now, but maybe it took that in a way for me to recalibrate. But these two big events happened to me, and I started questioning everything, and literally everything, the things in my life especially, because I had spent the last dozen years, I was 30 at the time, and as I began questioning those things in my life, I realized like I had worked so hard to buy a bunch of things to make me happy, and those things aren't doing their job. And so they had become my priority though. And so of course my priorities were totally out of whack. Achievement, success. Now, it's not that Ryan and I are against material possessions, and we don't think it's morally wrong to own things, right? We own stuff. I got here in a car today. Yeah. I have a bed and a couch.
Wearing a nice jacket.
Yeah, thank you.
A lot of money spent on hair products.
But the thing is, I had such an attachment to the things, but also the perception of other people, and a lot of that had to do with ego, and so ultimately what I figured out at the time was, my priorities are really out of whack. And thankfully I stumbled across minimalism thanks to the internet at the time. Someone tweeted Colin Wright, a friend of ours, who was in our first Minimalism documentary, and he lived with 52 items. And I didn't aspire to that, but it made me realize there was a relatively normal person doing very abnormal things. And I didn't want to live his life, but that exposed me to a bunch of other minimalists, people like Leo Babalto, Courtney Carver, and Joshua Becker, more normal people who had like families and houses. And
right. Leo's got like 5 kids or something like that. Six.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
He didn't even have condoms.
Right.
He was so minimalist.
But what's interesting about this to me is you could have, given a different set of circumstances, like ended up at a Buddhist monastery or joining the Peace Corps. Like clearly you were having an existential crisis about how you were living. Like you had premised your entire life on this idea that this very traditional upward corporate trajectory would deliver on its promise of making you happy. You achieve those things. You're lacking that, sense of connection that you thought it would deliver, and you go searching, right? And you stumble upon minimalism, but what if it had been some other thing? There are other paths to, sort of finding a little bit more fulfillment and purpose. But you, for whatever reason, like minimalism was the thing that you connected with.
Yeah, and by the way, I think that I connected with it because there wasn't a particular dogma among the people that I saw. There wasn't like a 12-step thing. And you know, I look at a lot of the stuff
Don't
now
you
on...
dare talk bad on the 12-step thing.
No,
Go ahead.
no. I'm not talking about 12
kidding.
steps. But like the 5 steps to declutter your closet.
Right, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so like it wasn't like the how-to side of things wasn't that appealing to me. It was the why-to side of things that really made me scrutinize what I was doing. Even now, you won't see me and Ryan talk about the 17 ways to declutter your kitchen. Mm-hmm. We're not going to do a video about that. If someone else wants to do that, that's fine. I don't think that actually addresses the problem. I think those types of solutions they often cause new problems because we begin to focus on, we turn those things into the main focus, and it removes our focus from whatever the underlying problem is. And so I was fascinated by what these people were doing and how they were doing it, but I was much more focused on the why. That's why the new film, Less Is Now, it really starts with that question: how might your life be better with less? Now that's a how question, but it's a disguised question. It's actually a why question.
You see that in the anecdotes and the stories of the kind of everyday people that have undergone this process and how it's emotionally changed their lives or their perspective on how they live day to day. But it is true, and we've talked about this before, that on a surface level, it's about getting rid of your stuff, but it's really not about that at all. And I think a lot of the focus or the kind of news narrative around it is around decluttering. But decluttering, the process of decluttering is really just a way to clear space so you can, marshal your awareness onto the things that are important that you want to focus on.
Yeah.
Is that fair or accurate?
Yeah. No, I think that is totally fair. It's interesting, though. It makes me think how the media wants to sell a solution to a symptom rather than address the problem. I mean, that doesn't really speak to what you were what you were asking, but...
Well, the problem is so massive, and we're all living, amidst this grand delusion, our entire society is founded upon the idea that, you played out in your own life and had to figure out for yourselves wasn't delivering on the promise, right? This idea that we should be seeking security and comfort and, salary increases in the new car, and all the messages that bombard us everywhere we turn our head reinforces that.
Yeah.
And yet what it doesn't do, and the movie does a beautiful job of illustrating this, is remind us about what's most important, which is, community and the connection to the people that we love, and pursuing your life with some level of intentionality.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, Annie Leonard talks about this in the documentary about deficit advertising. So, advertisers, big corporations, whatever, they go out of their way to make you feel like you're missing something in your life. So that's why we chase the bigger paycheck, so we can go out and buy those things that subconsciously we're like, oh man, if I just had like a little bit of a nicer car, I'd have a better ride to work, and I'd enjoy my commute a little bit more. And if I had just a little bit bigger of a house, I could have that Pilates studio. And I mean, yeah.
You just notch it up, and then you get there, and then you're like, well, I don't feel that way yet, but it's because there's a guy who's living a little bit higher up on the hill than I am.
Yeah.
Yeah. By the way, I don't want to moralize any of this either. I don't want to say it's better or worse to own fewer possessions, right? Sure. I'm not saying that it's good that Ryan and I own less than we used to own, right? I'm not saying it's bad either. It is probably more appropriate for us, given the constraints. But to the point you were asking about, Rich, our material possessions are sort of this physical manifestation of what's going on inside us, right? That's that existential crisis you talked about. And so the external clutter is a way that we sort of visualize the mental clutter, the psychological clutter, the emotional clutter, the spiritual clutter, this internal clutter. And we found that, like with minimalism, it could have been Buddhism or Christianity or anything else that we would have stumbled into. But stumbling into minimalism allowed us to deal with the thing that had become this priority in our lives. Stuff had become this priority. And so it started with the stuff, but that's sort of the initial bite at the apple, right?
Right.
And then it goes to simplifying all other areas of life.
Right. But there's this moment that you experienced and that you see in the people profiled in the film where the lights kind of go on, like as they begin this process, there's like an enervating that occurs in their lives. Like they become very emotionally involved in the process of decluttering their lives. And it becomes like exciting and there's a momentum that kind of occurs.
Yeah. Yeah. You're talking about the everyday minimalists that we have in our film. Yeah. No, it is encouraging. There's one gentleman in there who talks about how once he started simplifying and got to where he, felt like he wasn't living in a bunch of clutter, he kind of realized like, oh, like I've had everything I ever needed this whole time. Mm-hmm. And
he gets emotional. And he's an older guy. He's not like a millennial.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
No, I love having those kind of everyday minimalists in there to kind of talk about their own personal experiences, especially because, Josh and I, we can tell our stories all day long, but you need other people to resonate with than just, two dudes with really great hair.
Rich, it is really great though.
we didn't want it to be the Josh and Ryan story, right? Like the first film, Minimalism, it was sort of exposing people to different ideas of intentional living, different areas of minimalism. There were minimalist architects in there, Buddhists, etc. In this film, we didn't want it to just be, Josh and Ryan tell their story. But it sort of circled around that initial story of us, but we brought in some experts, but then we also had those 30 of those everyday minimalists. So we wanted all these different perspectives. I mean, you probably notice the diversity in the film, but it's not just like an ethnic diversity. It's like we have a 17-year-old and a 70-year-old in the film. And all we did was we put a call out and said, hey, does anyone have a story about how they've been affected by our first film and they've simplified their lives, and how did that work out for you? And we just started bringing those people into the film.
Right. Yeah. So taking it back, you have this experience in the wake of your marriage dissolving and your mother's passing, where you decide that you're going to basically change your lifestyle top to bottom.
Yeah.
You get rid of all this stuff. You have that lights going on experience. You seem lighter in your shoes. I assume you were still at the job at that point, but you were just showing up with a little bit of a bigger smile.
Yeah, I was doing a better job setting expectations. So we were on call like doctors, but I wasn't saving anyone. I couldn't even save myself. And yet I had to answer the phone at 10 p.m. if my boss's boss wanted to know something about the sales transactions for any of the stores that day. So it was a regular occurrence. The last thing I did when my head hit the pillow was check my BlackBerry. The first thing when I got up in the morning was check my BlackBerry. And all throughout the day, I was checking. And I started setting expectations, and that was sacrilegious where we worked. I called my boss, said, I'm not going to take phone calls in the evening anymore. And I could audibly hear his jaw drop on the phone because... What do you mean? That's not like you realize that he didn't realize that was an option.
Yeah,
even for himself.
I got a call from our boss. We had the same boss, and he was like, "Is Josh is he depressed? Like maybe planning on killing himself or something?"
I'm giving away my stuff, right?
Giving away his stuff. He's like saying, "Hey, I don't care what you think. I'm not taking phone calls at 6." Yeah. But isn't that kind of sad? Like that's the reaction though.
Yeah.
Instead of
as opposed to wow, is he doing something to change his life so that he experiences more peace or more contentment?
Yeah.
Like I said, I don't think this is an indictment on stuff or even on corporate America. It's an indictment on chasing, on craving, on attachment.
Well, also on your relationship to externalities, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Ryan, at some point, you begin to cotton on to this, like what's going on with Joshua, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was after him setting boundaries. It was, after that phone call from our boss, because I did not see a depressed Josh. I saw someone who was like taking control of something that he had no control over. And it wasn't until he moved into a new place after he split up with his wife. And it was like a 2-bedroom, 1 bath, or maybe 2 baths, but it was only half full. But the one thing that was missing that really stood out to me was the TV. And every time I'd go over, I'd be like, dude, when are you getting a TV? What kind of TV are you going to get? Because that's how we like compared success in the corporate world. Like, what kind of TV you got at your house? How many TVs do you have? How big is that TV, right?
I wonder what Freud would say about this.
So at a certain point, he's like, I don't think I'm going to get a TV. I'm like, interesting. And eventually I wanted whatever he was doing. And when he said minimalism, you know, I don't know. You asked that in the beginning about would it have been a different path? You know, could it have been a different path if we didn't find minimalism?
Right. Well, if he shaved his head and disappeared to a monastery for a while and came back, maybe you wouldn't have been so.
Yeah, probably not. Probably not.
Yeah.
So, but you know, he introduced the term minimalism to me, and if you know, to be honest, if it was someone else, I don't know how seriously I would have taken it. But him and I have it's weird. We have like exact opposite Myers-Briggs personalities, but we have very similar personalities in other ways. So I was like, if this works for him, I'll at least give it a shot and look at it and see if it'll work for me. So the first video he sent me was Colin Wright with the 50 things that he owned. And I'm like, oh, okay, like this is a little weird. But then like I got into other minimalists, Courtney Carver, Leo Babauta, Joshua Becker. And you know what I saw is common sense. I saw a lot of people talking about all these common sense things that I knew internally, but for some reason I never listened to. And minimalism, for me, it was an opportunity for me to start over. It was an opportunity for me to, do what Josh did and gain control of what I had lost control over. So I got really excited. I'm like, dude, I want to be a minimalist. Like, this is awesome. Like, I get it. What should I do?
Right. So you do this packing party thing.
Right.
Basically.
So yeah, exactly. So, in the excitement, he was like, well, what if we pack up all your stuff and then unpack it as you need it? I'm like, that's a great idea, especially because I'm a very extreme person when it comes to things. Like Josh had pared down over several months. He made some very slow changes over months' time. But for me, like I needed faster results. So the packing party was perfect for me. I think probably most of your listeners right now, I don't know if the packing party would be the best option for, especially if they got families and stuff.
Yeah.
Although we have totally seen families do.
Well, yeah, I'll say this.
Well, everyone's at home thinking of interesting things to do, right? There's a lot of people rearranging the furniture in their houses right now, losing their minds.
Yeah. This is like the perfect time for them to confront all their stuff.
The one time you're really confronted with everything, like truly confronted, is when you move to a new house. And so that was sort of the impetus of the packing party idea. It was like, when you move, you actually have to go through everything you own and do something with it, whether it's store it, box it up, whatever. It doesn't matter. You have to do something with that stuff. And now is sort of the second time where this has happened, where people have been in their homes for way more than they anticipated. And we thought at the beginning, it's like people were like reaching out to us like, hey, you guys, you're probably upset that you got rid of all that stuff, aren't you? Now that you're stuck at home. And I'm like, yeah, the broken waffle iron is really, I'm missing that right now, right?
Yeah.
Like the third bread maker that I got as a wedding gift. And so anyway, that packing party, we've had dozens of people do. In fact, we have a book coming out next year called Love People Use Things. It's like the whole sort of synopsis of our message. And in that book, we had 47 different families do a packing party. So it may seem radical, but it's not so radical that, I mean, we've had a lot of people do it.
Yeah. The idea being you pack everything up and then you slowly unpack and deliberately decide which items you actually need to use. And the rest gets donated or sold.
Right. Yeah. I mean, Josh had asked me, he's like, what if you unpack things as you needed it? Like that would really help. And I'm like, yeah, it's a great idea. That's what we should do. And so you can imagine, my clothes for work, bed sheets, toothbrush, so forth and so on. But I'll tell you, the packing party, it was something to like change my state, but I honestly didn't realize how powerful that was going to be until it was over and I was confronted with all my things. And the biggest revelation was I had this dream of retiring early, but I had like very little retirement, very little in my retirement accounts. But here I saw tens of thousands of dollars that I wasn't using, worth of stuff. And I'm like, I could probably be sitting in my retirement account right now. Yeah. But I remember going to Josh, I'm like, dude, we have to do a website and talk about this packing party because this is something.
So that was the original impetus to start the blog.
Yep. Yeah. It started 10 years ago yesterday.
I know. I saw on Instagram your 10 year. You guys have been doing this for 10 years.
10 years.
It's unbelievable, man.
Yeah.
How do you what's the difference between your relationship to minimalism then in the early days to now? Like, how has it evolved or changed?
I think it's changed quite a bit recently. I've become more allergic to the sort of how-to side of things. I've never been a giant fan of it, but I've realized that it's actually, before I was somewhat neutral on it, it just wasn't for me. But now I think it's often a problem. And I think it's an opiate in a way, because it helps, as Ryan alluded to earlier, the sort of the symptoms. Like if I show you how to declutter your kitchen, but you don't know why you're doing it, it's going to be recluttered a month from now. And so getting a deep understanding, if you understand the why, truly understand the why, the how takes care of itself. And so we'll talk about some of the how stuff that we've done. That may not be applicable for everyone, by the way. My why looks different from Ryan's why. And that's why starting out with that question, how might your life be better with less, is really the foundation of it. Then we can talk about the how too.
But it's the process. It's the how that opens the portal to the why, right? Like if you're living your life in a certain way with blinders on and just moving in a particular direction, it's very hard to answer that question of why. Like you got to shake things up and do something different in order to, kind of confront that, right? Like short of you doing the packing party, would you have been, if confronted with the why question, how are you going to answer that? So it's almost like there needs to be, a deconstruction of your life a little bit, and there's some practicalities that get baked into that.
It's interesting, yeah. It's almost like the why was so much in my face at the time of how miserable I was. It was like,
but also you're holding on to it so hard because your whole life has been invested in that.
Yeah. But if it wasn't for that amount of, or that level of stress and discontent and depression, I don't know if I would have.
Right.
Because the problem is sometimes
pain is the lever. It's the ultimate lever.
Yeah. And comfort is like, I don't know. Comfort to me is, don't get me wrong, I like being comfortable, but
it's fuel for denial.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, the thing I look at with what Ryan, I think Ryan's actually the perfect example of, if you understand the why, the how takes care of itself. No one gave him a how-to. There was not a prescription for a packing party ever. Like it didn't exist, right? What did exist were a bunch of decluttering tips and other things that we had seen for decades and never paid any attention to, because that's not that compelling. It's compelling in the moment at the checkout line, the same way candy is appealing at the checkout line, right? But it's not nutritious in any way. And so when Ryan truly understood the why, like, I don't feel at peace, I feel chaos. Let me sort through this. Let me not fix it, because nothing is fixed, right? There's always change, right? It's not about fixing something. It's about addressing the problem. And I think that's what the packing party did. It was the impetus. Now, we talk about the how, but Ryan always talk about how what we share is like a recipe, and you can sort of tweeze out your own ingredients and create your own version of it, adjust for taste.
Yeah.
So how long after this packing party and this decision to write about these things before you guys are no longer working at the corporation, right? Like I know you got laid off.
I got laid off, yeah. Months after Josh. Josh technically got laid off too.
I laid myself off.
You did?
Yeah. It was, they came to me, so this was 10 years ago as well. They came to me right before Christmas, said, hey, as soon as we close, or as soon as we finish out the holiday shopping season, which by the way, we've turned the holiday season into a shopping season. Think about that for a moment. But they said, as soon as we do this, I need you to close 8 stores and lay off 42 employees. I'd done this a bunch of times. It was never fun, but it got easier over time. So I laid off a bunch of people and fired people. It wasn't that big of a deal. But then with this new perspective, I had been simplifying my life that entire year. They said, you got 2 weeks to put together this plan, give us the 42 names that you're going to lay off. And so I went home, and within 2 days, I was putting the spreadsheets together, but looking at the spreadsheet was like looking at a rainbow in black and white, in grayscale, right? Because these were just names and statistics. And I get that's how you're going to make a decision like this. But these weren't just names. These were husbands and fathers and daughters and mothers, and these were people. And my livelihood was in their hands. And I knew that like there was some sort of discontent, but at that point I realized the corporation we were at no longer aligned with my personal values. And so I turned the plan in. My name was the first name on the list.
So you really did lay yourself off.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I didn't have a plan. I just had reduced my bills so significantly, living in Dayton, Ohio, $500 a month apartment. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to try this writing thing out for a while. There's a coffee shop in my neighborhood. They actually end up in the documentary press. Yeah. And I said, I'll just work there, and I'll have enough money to pay my bills, and I'll write for the rest of the time. I wanted to write fiction initially. Thanks to Ryan, this was a beautiful accident in a different direction.
Right. So you guys start meeting at press. You start working on this blog.
Yeah. I mean, that's what we did for the first year.
Right.
We just wrote on the blog and put our thoughts out there.
Was there a moment, like a tipping point moment with the blog where you're like, wow, like this could be a thing. Like we could actually craft a vocation around this.
What is the tipping point? I think for me, it's the San Francisco event.
For me, it was before that.
It was before that? Okay.
Yeah, for me, it was Leo Babalta shared something that we did. And
I was reading his blog back then too. I mean, that was like everyone was reading his stuff.
And we had like more people show up in one day. It wasn't a lot of people. It was like 9,000 people or something. For me, it was like, oh, we haven't seen. So we talk about this in the film, how like 52 readers that first month turned into 500, which turned into 5 million or whatever. And so there was a moment there. Around that same time, it was like, hey, you guys are the Minimalists, aren't you? Did you write a book about minimalism? And it's like, oh, I guess we should do that, huh?
We are the Minimalists, yeah.
And so we did. We put out a book. At the time, we just self-published a book at the end of our first year. And we went on tour, but it was really just, we went around the country to coffee shops and it made me realize, like, oh, if we can get 8 people to show up and buy a book.
Most stops were like, 2 to 8 people.
Yeah, if we sell 10
when
books,
you're living minimally, you don't need much, right?
No,
exactly. Feed yourselves.
If we can sell 10 books,
then we have a place to stay for the night. If not, then we just sleep in Ryan's Toyota Corolla.
Right.
And that's how it worked out for us.
Yeah.
Well, the first movie did such a great job at spinning that yarn of you guys going on the road and showing up at places, and 3 people would show up, and then slowly a few more, and you see the build. But it's the grittiness of the early days that was so fun.
I'm just thinking about that South by event in that Minimalism documentary, because I remember being so excited for that South by Southwest event. Like, we made it.
Right.
We finally.
It's like it's a buddy movie road trip on like a Wizard of Oz movie with South by Southwest being you guys going to meet Oz.
And I was thinking this was like, the apex of our journey. Like, we were at South by Southwest. And then 3 people showed up to our tour.
And they're like on their phones.
Yeah.
By the way, it's 8 a.m. on a Sunday morning. Ryan's trying to talk about living with less.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, that was great.
Lanyards.
This big room with 3 people in it.
Well, that movie's so well done. And I have to imagine that had to be life-changing in some regard. I think it's most people's introduction to your work, because Netflix put it right out front and so many people watched it. The first question I have about that first movie is, how did you connect with Matt D'Avella? Because Matt D'Avella, he's had his own crazy trajectory, blowing up on YouTube and being this massive creator on that platform.
100%.
He's
all grown up.
We connected with him
on
Twitter when he was a wedding videographer.
Yeah.
And I saw this video he made called "Most Wedding Videographers Suck," and I still bring that up to him constantly.
Yeah.
But he was doing that, and he was doing other commercial work for I don't know, Toyota or Subaru or something, and we hired him to do the trailer for our second book, Everything That Remains. And we did an event out in New York to sort of celebrate this, and he filmed that event and made a trailer for that book that we put up on YouTube. And that was sort of it. And then a few months later, I said, hey, we're getting ready to go on the road. 2014, we did that 100-city tour, right? And said, hey, do you want to come on the road with us and try to make a documentary? And he had been wanting to do something with his creative skills other than commercial work, right? And so he's like, yeah, I'll give it a shot. At the end of the tour, it was like, he just had a few hard drives with 1,000 hours of footage.
Right, yeah.
It was like, hey, good luck with that. And then
so he just went away and came back with a cut for you guys?
Yeah.
I remember dropping him off at the airport, and I just remember thinking to myself, I
don't think this is a movie.
Yeah. I have no idea how he's going to pull this together. But there was no budget for it. I mean, we were just, passionate about it. So it's not like we had a lot to lose. But then he sent that first cut, and I was instantly like, oh, wow. Like Matt knows what he's doing. And I always make sure and tell people that, because people will come up to me and they'll be like, oh, you're the guy from the Minimalism Documentary. Great doc. You did such a good job. And I'm like, I wish I could say it was me, but it's really Matt D'Avella who did that whole documentary.
He did an unbelievable job, and all the accolades and success that he's enjoying on YouTube are well deserved.
Oh yeah, what he does is amazing on YouTube, and he has built up this amazing following, especially of young people,
right?
Who really, he's brought the message of minimalism to a crowd that maybe Ryan and I weren't ever going to reach either. So yeah, he does he makes these like mini documentaries.
I know every one of his videos is like, should enjoy a theatrical release.
All right.
Yeah, that's awesome. I hope he gets that
art.
I'm going to tell him that compliment.
Yeah, and he's a guy who walks the talk. Like he just this past week gave away all his stuff yet again, and him and his wife are on the road and now in Sydney. Like they're just going to travel. They literally everything they own is in like little carry-on suitcases.
Yeah, it's a beautiful example of how you can turn your life around on a dime when you have the power to let go of anything in your life. And that's exactly what he displayed with that. It was, because minimalism is not about owning nothing. It's just about breaking free from that attachment, breaking free from that, I don't know another word for it. Just that attraction.
There's a sense that, if you're going to be a minimalist, that you're self-flagellating or you're some kind of martyr, when in truth, you're just purchasing freedom for yourself.
Absolutely.
And choices. Right? To be able to, self-employment is such a gift, but it gives him, with the things that he does, the ability to just, pack it up and go wherever he wants.
Yeah,
which is unbelievable.
Yeah, and you see him work; it's amazing. You wouldn't think he's able to. He has the strangest sort of. He's like hiding under the table, looking up with the camera. Like, you're like, what is he doing? Is that a crotch shot? I'm not sure what's going on here, but somehow. He has,
and a total one-man show. When I did his, I was one of the early guests on his podcast, and he's got all these cameras, and he's doing it all himself. Like he's manning the cameras, he's asking the questions, he's got the monitor there. I'm like, this looks stressful. Get a little help. But he's like, no, he knows what he's doing. He's like a master of his domain.
Well, and his hidden secret is his skill at editing. So we had. We had some help on this film. Angus Wall and his team. I don't know if you Angus Wall, but he's David Fincher's editor. So he edited like Fight Club. He edited The Social Network. He won some Academy Award for that. He edited what's the one with what's the other big one he did with.
I know it's on the tip of my tongue too.
Girl with the Dragon Tattoo.
Oh wow!
He did the opening sequence to that. Anyway, his company did the animation in Less Is Now, and he was we were going to bring him and that team on to edit the film, but Matt was just like, "No, I'm good." Like,
I got it covered.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, the weird thing about it is, I don't think Matt likes editing at all. But that is his hidden. Like, he's the Mozart of editing, and he even like when we went from like fourth cut to fifth cut, Angus saw it and he was like, "This looks like I went through 60 different cuts of the film." Yeah. So kudos to him.
Yeah. So the movie explodes, and you guys kind of ride this wave. You have the books, and you started the podcast. You're now 10 years into this thing. You've got millions of people all over the world that care deeply about the things that you talk about. And what's really cool and compelling about this platform that you now manage is that it's completely audience supported. Like you start all your podcasts, advertisements suck, and you have this population of people that adore you and basically, are willing to subscribe to your wisdom, and you've been able to craft out making a living off of this for a decade.
Most of what we do is free and available to the public, right? And there's a small portion where we sort of dive deeper. And our private podcast is on Patreon, and we do have an audience that supports us there. But that's also it's almost like when you go to back when we could go to the Comedy Store, places like that, where people sort of work out ideas.
Right.
We work out things, and sometimes Ryan and I just argue on the private podcast about things because we don't agree about something, or we bring a guest on and we argue with them about it. And
I like to think of it as talking things out.
yes, yeah. And so, but most of what we do is, whether it's the blog or or the main podcast, it's accessible to anyone.
Right. When you were touring, how many cities did you do? I mean, you guys invited me to come when you did the Fillmore in San Francisco, which was like so cool, man.
Oh, yeah.
You guys were filling theaters like all across the country.
Oh yeah, yeah. You're at the Fillmore
Super
with
fun.
us. Yeah, that was great.
Yeah, I mean, the most we've ever done was 100 cities, 119 events in 1 year.
Wow.
We canceled a tour this year, 2020,
Right.
because of 2020
For obvious reasons.
And yeah, I mean, we've done 9 tours in 10 years. So anywhere from a few cities, like the Simply Southern tour was 3 cities. We went with Dave Ramsey's team and did a small tour in the South, to 100 cities everywhere in between. But yeah, it just became a part of, and by the way, all those tours were different as well. Sometimes it's a podcast tour, sometimes we do a talk, sometimes we'll do book readings and book signings.
Right.
It kind of just depends on what's going on.
Yeah.
So Dave Ramsey features pretty prominently in the new movie. So how did that relationship develop? How does he fit into the minimalist ecosystem?
His daughter really likes us.
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Okay.
His daughter works for him. She's a very talented author. Her name's Rachel Cruz, and she has a great YouTube show. And she invited us to come on her YouTube show. It's in Nashville. And it's a whole production. They have a whole studio set up there. I mean, he has 1,000 employees at his compound. It's a really impressive setup. And they work really hard to teach financial literacy. They're now being taught in 25% of the high schools around the country. The Dave Ramsey curriculum. He has a whole team, 100 people on that team.
His whole thing is about living fiscally responsible.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like not living outside of your means and
Yeah.
making sure that you're making prudent financial, essentially like conservative, prudent financial decisions.
Yeah, I feel like he's like a minimalist finance guy, basically. Because minimalism. It's funny when I first heard about it and looked into it. I kind of thought like it was this niche type thing, and then like once I got into it, I'm like, oh, like this can be applied to anything. And I think Dave Ramsey essentially applies minimalism to finances and
Right.
yeah,
Right.
he's got some great financial.
His whole team,
advice.
though, they're great. Anthony O'Neill, Chris Hogan.
Yeah,
The whole lot of them. John Deloney.
yeah. Ken.
So we're well into this pandemic cycle, fraying at the edges
cycle,
as
yeah.
we crawl towards 2021.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm interested in how you're thinking about the relationship between consumerism and minimalism with this very specific moment. The way that I'm kind of thinking about it is that on the one hand, like nobody's going to the mall, they're not shopping, they're at home. So it's forcing people to perhaps be a little bit more reflective about those habits on some level. Yet at the same time, we're all empowered by these tools, and we're spending, these technological tools. We're all in front of our screens way too much.
Yeah.
And that habituation to shopping has just migrated to the devices. I don't know what the statistics are, but I'm certain that online shopping has skyrocketed. But has consumerism overall increased during this moment? Like, how are you thinking about people's habits? What does that look like right
Depends
now?
what we mean by consumerism. So I do think consumerism is the right way to frame it. That is one of the problems, right? Consumption isn't the problem. We talk about this in Less Is Now, because we all need to consume some stuff. Consumerism, which is what we could just identify as compulsory consumption in a way, as though we feel that, as though we must buy this in order to either be complete. Ryan talked about the deficit advertising earlier, or the what else does Annie call it in the film? The vertical integration. And so and no longer are you just competing with your next door neighbor. It's your
Yeah, talk about that. That's a really fascinating, important idea, I think.
So here's the new problem. If consumerism is one problem, when we relate that to stuff, materialism is really that. The other side of consumerism is distraction, I think. And so the thing that Ryan and I will say is scrolling is the new smoking. And this epiphany hit me when I was walking outside of like a Chipotle or something, I see someone outside in the cold, like in the Midwest, scrolling on their phone, cigarette in hand at the same time. And it's not to judge that person, it's to see myself in that person. Like I don't smoke, but like I could see, my habits are showing, right? And it's not just the smoking. Now, 50 years ago, everyone sort of casually puffed cigarettes. We'd be at this table right now just smoking,
Right.
talking, right?
Be a cloud.
Right. But you did that now, it would seem nutty. If I just lit up a cigarette right now, you wouldn't know how to respond to that.
Right.
The only person who can do that is Dave Chappelle, by the way. But besides him, like it would seem nutty, and yet it doesn't seem that strange. Because of the three of us, but at your average setting, if I were to pull out a phone and just check it really quick. But it's just as bothersome in many ways. It's secondhand distraction. Right. And so I think over the last decade in particular, what we've seen is a lot of new ways to distract ourselves. Ryan and I distracted ourselves back in the oddies and in the late 90s with stuff. But now the distractions are digital and they're right there and they're more enticing than ever. And the same thing happens, right? In the material world, it was high-paid demographers, statisticians, marketers aggregating your eyeballs onto their product or service. Now, since you're the product, it's aggregating your eyeballs onto the product and the service to sell you products and services. And so in a weird way, a dystopian way, it elevates the problem. It amplifies the problem.
Right. I mean, without a doubt, and this is subject matter and terrain that movies like The Social Dilemma go into at length. It's not just enticing, it's truly addictive, and it's designed to be that way. The revelatory idea that I had not thought about before until I saw your movie was this idea of the kind of exponential expansion of keeping up with the Joneses, right? Like this consumerist impulse originally derived from, perhaps something genetic within us to try to, keep pace with our neighbors. So-and-so's got that refrigerator or that car, like I've got to get that too. But now, by dint of these technological tools, everybody's our neighbor. So it's not just the person living next door, but it's, the celebrity on Instagram, and you get to peek into their world. Or now on Zoom, you get to see, what everybody's, study and living room looks like. And it's almost impossible to not run that comparison against what you have or don't have. And how does that impact your consumer choices or your sense of innate discontent when you attempt to measure yourself against that impossible standard?
I think comparison is the killer of joy, regardless of, kind of how you're comparing yourself or what you have to other people. It is interesting, like with the whole social media, it's like, my sister, when I was in Ohio a year ago, back when we were traveling without any fear. She was like, do you feel cool because you got, X amount of subscribers on Instagram? And I'm like, no. I was like, do you think I'm cool because I have that many subscribers? And she's like, yeah, I think it's pretty cool. And I'm like, if you're looking at subscribers, like I don't even know what I have. I know it's not 1 million, but I'm like, if you got to where I'm at with however many subscribers, then you'd be looking at 1 million. And then once you had 1 million, you'd be looking at 3 million. It's like a never ending comparison wheel that we put ourselves on.
Right. It's failure. Yeah. It's in a weird way, all success is failure.
So what are the tactics that you deploy to prevent yourself from, indulging in that kind of, fruitless mental exercise? Because it's hard, right?
Yeah, it is. It is. I mean, I don't look at specific numbers. Like that's one way, because I think I'm a numbers guy in general. I love math. I love spreadsheets. So I could very easily get wrapped up into it just to like make a game out of it. But I try to not gamify it as much as possible. But I'll be honest, like because of, man, this is going to sound like some, Buddhist hybrid thing, but because of how destructive my ego was in the corporate world, anytime I start to feel the ego kicking in, which it kicks in all the time, but when I start to feel it kicking in with like, oh, how many subscribers did I gain today, or how many? Because I did feel that in the early days. I try not to stroke that ego, and by practicing that over the last 10 years, I am able to just kind of still feel like I felt 10 years ago. I don't feel any more popular or successful. I mean, even it's funny you were talking about us having a lot of people who adore us, I think is what you said, and like they're willing to support us. And I appreciate those people so much, but like hearing you say it, like my ego was like, oh wow, that is amazing. We do have all these people who adore us and who will support us. But yeah, so like I guess just to reiterate, like when my ego starts to get out of control, I will try to like put it in check a little bit, because ultimately when I know if I ever start to play that game, it'll never be enough.
Yeah, I don't have any tactics.
You guys aren't getting into Twitter spats and things like that. Like you seem to just, I can tell by the way that you share your content online that it's kind of at an arm's length. Like you make sure that your stuff is being shared, but you're not, in there, going back and forth with people and stuff like that.
A healthy detachment. I'm not the Buddha, right? Like the Buddha would be non-attachment, right? But not needing to be, not needing the outcome and not needing any of it, by the way. The by being detached, you realize that this is going to sound like a value judgment, but it's not. It's all a scam, man. It really, who cares? Like, it's all ego. Even, by the way, what have I changed my mind about recently? Helping people. I don't want to help people. Let's be honest. Like, helping people, that's just my ego saying I want to help people. Now, I feel it still viscerally because I've programmed myself.
You will be externally validated if you say that out loud.
Right. It's my, no. But maybe the truth behind that is, well, I want peace. I want to speak the truth. And if that helps some people, that's wonderful. If it doesn't, it can still be wonderful. I don't need that. Because once I become attached to needing to help someone, it's a different type of prison. It's a well-decorated prison cell, but it's still a prison cell.
You can help people for selfish reasons though too, because it makes you feel good. It actually makes it gives your life a little bit more meaning, and it builds self-esteem. So even if your impetus, your impulse is selfish, it's still a good thing to follow through on.
Yeah. And by the way, I'm not saying that helping people is good or bad, right? It's not and also not helping people is not good or bad by default then, right? I don't want to throw that judgment out there. I'm simply saying that, like, I have to be honest with myself that, like, it's my ego that's involved, where I'm like, it's what Ryan said, if I have 10 million Instagram followers, I'm helping more people. Well, is that the truth? Or is that just a statistic?
I feel like there's two interesting things happening right now, which is the undeniable rise of popularity around minimalism and related ideas. Like, there is a groundswell of people who are feeling disconnected and dissatisfied in a way, and are discovering this way of living that is giving their lives greater meaning and purpose. But in tandem with that, we're also seeing this acceleration of our materialistic consumer culture. I mean, you see it in the film too, the kind of rapidization of home delivery and Amazon and the drones, and how everything just seems like it's on steroids right now, almost like this war of ideas that are like bumping up against each other.
Yeah. Well, you also see the sort of corporatization of simplicity as well, right? When Marie Kondo's selling things at the Container Store.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
The Container Store is actually one of the biggest problems, right? The Container Store allows us to hide our hoards. And this is an indictment on Marie Kondo. I think she really does get to the why in her book, The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up. Like, she does talk, she obviously discusses the how-to stuff. That's her shtick, but she gets to the why. But when I see, tuning forks for several $100s and crystals and the commodification of simplicity, like, you don't need anything to simplify, right? Organizing is just well-planned hoarding. And the thing we talk about in the film is the average American household has 300,000 items in it, right? Now, I had a really organized version of that. I had basements with a basement full of bins and boxes, an ordinal alphabetized system of CDs and DVDs, but it was just well-planned hoarding. The easiest way to organize your stuff is to get rid of anything that's no longer adding value. Right. Get rid of most of it. It's so much easier to, quote unquote, organize, because you don't have anything that you have to organize. You're getting to the essence and you're stopped worrying about the form.
Yeah. I love that quote that you shared recently. Everything is 100% off if you don't buy it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we shared that maybe on Black Friday or something. Yeah.
Man, I wish I
Yeah.
could have told my 25-year-old self that. Oh, man.
He may have not been ready for it, though.
No, you said something about, real briefly, about minimalism bringing meaning to people's lives. And I don't know if minimalism brings meaning to people's lives. I think minimalism helps someone etch a sketch, a new life. It helps them start over. And then from there, they can start to do meaningful things. And that's really what Less Is Now is about. It's about, being able to start over. But thanks for however you phrased it, made me think of it in a way of, I don't think minimalism is...
By getting it wrong.
Right, yeah.
I mean, I was alluding to that, but yeah, I hear what you're saying. No, that's a very good point. The question I was going to ask was, what would you tell yourself, 5 years ago when you were well into the minimalism thing, that you understand better now that maybe you didn't then as you kind of mature?
5 years ago.
Drop the prescriptions.
Yeah.
Like not the actual medical prescriptions, but like
you mean that back to the how-to thing?
Yeah, but also the desire to give advice to people, that's also an ego thing, right? I have no more advice. I have some observations if you want to hear my own observations about my own life. But even then, going back and giving advice to my 35-year-old self would be almost counterintuitive. Now, if I could show him some things, it'd be the piece that's related to letting go of some of the attachments. Because I think Ryan and I, we picked up new attachments along the way, especially when that film came out. Talk about serving your ego when you get recognized on the street a dozen times a day. All of a sudden, you start to believe that you're better than what you are. And Ryan and I, for a period of time, I think we went 3 years without doing any media as a result. Like I was just like, it doesn't feel good to need this. And because it feels like you're creating for the wrong reason. It feels as though like it's that externality you talked about.
Well, that's a healthy dose of self-awareness.
Maybe. I mean, yeah, I'm still working on eradicating that, right?
Yeah.
Aren't we all? If you ever figure it out, let me know.
Well, that's the thing. I don't think we ever figure it out. I think it is the eradication thing, right? You don't figure out heart disease. You try to eradicate it in a way.
Yeah.
So the first movie came out in 2016. What year was that?
Yeah. So Netflix actually turned us down twice on that film. We put it out on our own. We did a theatrical release through a company called Gather at the time. I don't even know if they're still around, but it was like theatrical on demand.
Was that 2016?
Yeah, that was May 2016. Wow. And we did 400 theaters, US, Canada, Australia. And then from there, we put out on our, we went back to Netflix. They said no again. And so we just put it out on our own. And it did relatively well. It resonated with people on iTunes and Amazon and other places. And so Netflix ended up saying yes to it. And that really started the conflagration, because we sent the rest of our audience there who had been listening to the podcast or reading the blog, and they, sparked whatever algorithm does, and it showed up on a lot more people's radar. I think that's how we showed up on your radar even. Yeah,
I think so. I mean, I think you were doing a few podcasts, so I saw you guys popping up on some friends and people that I knew. And then I saw the movie. I was very struck by the movie. And then we did one of our retreats in Italy, and we screened it for the group that we had there, which was really cool. I was just remembering that today.
That's awesome.
And I can't remember whether I did that. I think I had interviewed you and then we went on the trip, or maybe I interviewed you right afterwards. I can't remember. But I just remember being very moved by that film. And then we did the podcast, and I believe that you might have even alluded, either on mic or off, that you guys were working on another documentary. Yeah. Like there was going to be a follow-up, right? And here we are 5, maybe almost 6 years later before Less Is Now premiere. So what happened?
We ran into some technical difficulties.
Well, Ryan and I, shortly after that came out, we went to Matt again, and we did another tour. It was called the Less Is Now tour, and we went out filming that, trying to sort of recreate the magic of the first film, and we put it together. We actually did an event at the Wilbur Theater. This is where Joe Rogan shot his most recent comedy special.
Beautiful spot.
Yeah, we filmed it. We gave a talk there, and we were going to sort of build the film around that talk. And we kind of end up doing that in this later version of the film. And the talk looked fine, but it kind of looked like a stand-up comedy special without comedy. You were waiting for the punch because it was the venue, right? It was, and so it fell flat. It didn't work, and so we did it again. We actually brought you out. We rented out this giant warehouse space.
Right. That was 2 years ago. Matt was there. There was tons of. Was it that
Almost
long
3.
ago?
It was,
almost 3. Yeah.
Yeah. It was,
And this was the big shoot. And you had a live audience.
Right.
I mean, that warehouse space is in the movie. Was that from that evening, or did you guys end up reshooting
that? Was from a year and a half later.
A year and a half
Right.
later, we went to the
Wow.
same studio.
Yeah, because I was telling Julie, we were watching, I was like, yeah, I was there that night when these guys were doing this, but I'm like, it doesn't look like there's people there. Like when I was there was a lot of people there. So something was weird. Yeah, something was different about it.
Yeah, so it went from a comedy special to no comedy to a really well done TEDx talk is what that.
That's what it looked like, right? And so that night you were there. You actually came up. You're gracious enough to do the intro for us, and we gave a talk in front of 2 different crowds because we figured, well, the Wilbur Theater aesthetic was the problem, and so we'll refilm this in front of a beautiful aesthetic, this old abandoned warehouse. We'll build the set for it, bring a crew out, film it, and it'll work out that way. That's the problem. Well, then so we get there, and then we start interspersing it with these documentary elements, and it was like mixing vegan cheesecake. Shout out to Rich Roll, and sweet and sour tofu. And just smushing them 2 together. And you're like, I really like both of these things. But they don't work when I smush them together. And so we had to go back to the drawing board, and we said, hey, we're just going to scrap. So that was the second time we did the film. We scrapped the whole thing and started over again. And so this project we thought was going to take us about 4 months ended up taking about 4 years from the inception until.
Because when I was there that night, my sense was that you guys were in the final throes of wrapping this thing up.
Oh, we were.
Right. Yeah.
Of that version.
Yeah.
And those 2 will never see the light of day. It's not that they were terrible. It just didn't work for what we were trying to communicate. And we wanted to, we knew it wasn't, we weren't really putting our best foot forward. As Ryan said, it was either it would have been a really good YouTube video.
Yeah, it would have been a great YouTube video.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say, just to add on to when we got those 2 films back, I just remember not getting the feeling that I got with Minimalism. Matt, for what we gave Matt, he did an amazing job for what we gave him. But yeah, it was. It's been a long road. But
well, it's tough too because the first one had a built-in narrative, and you guys are these underdogs, and you're going on this trip, right?
Yeah.
So there's a kind of a tempo or a propulsion to that. And in the follow-up, then the challenge is well, how do we, what's the next chapter of this, and how do we make that compelling? And
I think that chapter ended up being the chapter before. It was in a weird way. It's the first ever documentary prequel.
Right.
It doesn't require you to see the first film, obviously.
No, not at all.
But they're 2 independent things. And this one, we were really aggressive about keeping it under an hour in the whole spirit of minimalism. But in doing that, we had to cut out a lot of amazing things. Ryan had this whole sub narrative about his. We can talk about it here because you haven't really talked about it publicly. The whole drug thing.
I was like you, Rich. I love to party.
Yeah, I mean, this was something that I know about you, but I've never heard you actually talk about. You've had your run-in with drugs and alcohol.
For sure, I do. I talk about whenever it comes up. I'm totally okay to talk, especially coming from Ohio, because I hope someone in Ohio who is hooked on pain pills right now is listening to this and knowing that they can totally pull themselves out of that situation. Because, Dayton, Ohio, where we're from, I don't know if it still is, but it was the overdose capital of the world. So there's a lot of drugs there. But yeah, to Josh's point, there was this beautiful arc in the film that we couldn't put in there that I really tried to get. And Matt tried to put it, it just didn't work. But it was about kind of going down that road and what pain that caused me and how I was able to, kind of start over. But it's those stories, again, unfortunately I couldn't make the film, but I think it's those stories that really mean the most to people. Like they want to hear about like, oh, Ryan isn't this perfect person who is just like one day like, oh, I'm going to simplify my life. And I mean, it was a lot of work and it was a lot of pain and it was a lot of discomfort. And I did get through it. But yeah, I was living in is it an opiate? Is that what pain pills are? Or are they?
They're opiates.
Many of them are.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, opiates were real easy access. And when I was working 60, 70, sometimes 80 hours a week, I would caffeinate myself. I didn't do a lot of coke, mainly because my mom like turned me off to that drug because I saw her go through her own thing. And I talk about that in the first documentary.
Yeah.
But I would caffeinate myself, eat Adderall, whatever productivity thing I could get in my body. But then you get home at 9 o'clock at night and it's hard to unwind, but it's really easy with like a pain pill and a beer. And so I got.
So it wasn't going out to the bars and getting loaded. It was more
some of that too.
more like I want to be. Right. Okay. Good. I feel better.
Unfortunately, we even did recreation scenes of Ryan getting beat up at a bar once.
Oh, yeah.
That didn't make the film. We're actually going to find a way to put a lot of this on Patreon or somewhere. Where, I actually just got permission from Netflix today to use some of these scenes somewhere. And Ryan talked about it in the film, but like was spending upwards of $5,000 a month on.
Wow.
I remember telling it
on opioids.
I'm like, I might have a problem. I was talking to my therapist about it, and I remember mentioning that to them, and she was like, she's like, I've seen worse. I've seen people spending $10,000, $15,000 a month on drugs.
Time for a new therapist.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
She's like, you're not that bad.
Wow.
I think she was just trying to like make me not feel so bad. But
So did you just go cold turkey and
Oh, no,
put it
I
in the
went-
rear view, or how did you
I went
past
through.
it?
I probably should have done a 12-step program, but I just went off. I went off of opiates to get on. There's a product called like Suboxone, yeah, and you don't really. Yeah, it's not like methadone. Like methadone is something that you just go from illegal addictions to legal addictions, where Suboxone works a little bit different in the brain. So I was on that program for a little bit, getting a lot of therapy. And I remember one time I like was going on a trip and I had forgot to bring my Suboxone. And I went like 2 weeks without it. And I was like, oh, I'm free. Like I'm done. I don't have to do this anymore.
and you just never went back?
Never went back. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, man.
Good for you, man.
Yeah. It was a long road. Like I wouldn't wish that experience on my worst enemy.
The detox from opioids is horrible.
It's miserable. I still don't think I've recovered 100%.
Like mentally, you mean, like brain function wise, or
sleep wise? I think.
Yeah, your deep sleep's still way off, right?
Yeah. I'm like
you guys are both rocking the Aura ring. I can tell. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah. It was a long road, but when I started living intentionally and like really facing these things head on, that wasn't like the magic answer, but it certainly gave me some leverage.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, alluding to something that I asked you about earlier, I mean, both of you guys survived quite a bit of childhood trauma. Do you are you in therapy? Like, how have you worked through? You seem to have a pretty healthy relationship with your past now. Like you don't. It doesn't feel like you're holding on to a lot of resentment and those kinds of negative patterns. So how did you work through that?
I think trauma's perspectival in many ways, right? Like, I talk about this in the film, so we can. My very first memory as a child is my father extinguishing a cigarette on my mom's chest. Now, of course, I'm going to remember something like
horrible.
that. Right, but I also don't think it traumatized me the same way that other things trauma. And so, it's weird. Like, I do remember that, and I'm sure it was awful or whatever. But there are other things that seem less consequential, but traumatize me even more. I was much more worried of Child Protective Services taking me away because my mom was an alcoholic. I think I was far more traumatized by that. I certainly have a lot of forms of sort of OCD, like low. I've been diagnosed with OCD, but it's low level. I'm not painting my floor every day or anything like that. But I'm sure that's a whole thing about control, right? Because of the chaos of childhood.
It's almost like you have this bar of like, well, I'm not painting my floor. Like,
Yeah.
Right.
But it's
Yeah.
I mean,
But you can have, just like anything, you can have an unhealthy relationship to a good thing. I'm sure that you could have
course.
an unhealthy relationship to minimalism where it is, I am absolutely in control of my environment all the time.
yeah.
the solution becomes the problem, right? And that's why the whole anti-prescription thing for me now is like, yeah, I've been doing a lot more exploration this year around that, but when we are looking for, we don't actually need the solutions. If your chair is on fire right now, Rich, you're not going to say, hey, can you hand me that fire safety manual over there? Because it would really help me out right now. You don't need 3 steps to get out of a flaming chair. You're going to do it. You're going to do it like that because your why is so powerful. The how takes care of itself, right? And so the problem is not a lack of instructions. The problem is that your butt is on fire.
Right.
And so I think that too often any answer I give you here will sort of be like a narrative overlay with respect to the trauma or whatever, but I think it does have to do with detachment ultimately. And maybe there's a healthy detachment and an unhealthy detachment, I don't know. But a healthy detachment from, I don't cling to that anymore.
I'm so glad you asked this question about like our childhoods, because I did hold on to a lot of resentment for my mother and father. And it was mainly because I felt kind of gypped of like, why would they do those things? You know, like, why didn't they, like, they're the parents, I'm the child. They should be able to know what to do. And, you know, any normal parent would put their child first. And I had all these, you know, narratives and all these questions. And through therapy, and I got to this recently within the last few years. I mean, I've always tried to have a good relationship with my parents with that resentment, but I was able to like let a lot of it go when it was a couple years ago, seeing a therapist here in LA, and he just kind of helped me get to this point of when things really started to like hit the fan. My parents were probably 30, maybe 32.
Right.
You know, like they're younger than I am now.
Yeah.
And
That's a trip when you realize that.
right. Yeah, it was. And I was like, wait a minute. Here I am with this narrative of like, they should have known what to do. And I'm like, I'm 37 years old. I have no idea what the hell I'm doing. And like, for me to put that pressure on them it wasn't fair. I didn't see it as fair. And I finally looked at them. I'm like, oh, like, because, you know, I'd love to sit here, Rich, and be like, oh, I've got a perfect life, become a minimalist, and you're going to live a perfect life. But I still struggle with a lot of things. And I've got my own battles that I'm fighting. And my parents, I finally was able to see, like, oh, they've got their own shit going on. They've got their own battles that they're fighting, and they're still fighting them to this day. And I'm really glad I don't have those battles. However, understanding that, like, you know, I'm 39 years old. I'm, for all intents and purposes, just as confused as they were at 32 years old. Yeah. And seeing that in them really helped me drop those, you know, poor me, why didn't they? They should have. It really helped me drop a lot of that.
Right. And that those behaviors aren't necessarily a referendum on how much they loved you or didn't love you. Right.
Absolutely.
But just their own personal limiters.
God,
I mean, when I think
like
about when I was 30, I was a disaster.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You
So
and me both.
Yeah, I definitely felt like it at the time, though. Growing up, you know, like if you loved me, you'd stop drinking, sort of thing, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I think Ryan and I grew up in similar sort of situations. I would argue his situation was far worse than mine in many respects.
Let's battle right now.
The SWAT team never raided my home.
Oh yeah, that's true. All right,
heavy,
you got me.
It's heavy.
But what I'll say is that like Ryan saw the partying growing up as a fun thing. He saw his mom in particular having fun with drugs and alcohol. I saw my mother being depressed with drugs and alcohol. I've never had a drink in my life because I saw the sort of terminus of this thing, right? Where Ryan saw what he thought was the terminus, the excitement, the joy, the pleasure. It wasn't real joy. It was confusing joy with pleasure.
Yeah, mom's house was like the party house. I mean, people would just pop in randomly at a pool and like fenced in backyard. Like, it was an above ground pool.
Yeah. But good times.
Right, exactly. But I bet that's all you needed, and a bunch of drugs and alcohol, and yeah, everyone's having a good time.
So it's fascinating to me that you guys have been best friends since 5th grade. You're now in 10 years of doing this thing together. So you're in business together. I've never seen you guys argue or act short with each other. You must have your moments. I mean, come on, right? But I mean, how do you take care of this relationship?
Exposed.
Yeah, how do you make sure that you guys are good with each other, right?
Yeah.
It's got to be challenging at times.
I think Josh is the most tolerant person I know. So he's just able to put up with all my crap.
That's what it is.
That's what it is. It has nothing to do with me.
It's a joke. We have an acronym that we often talk about. Shout out to Patrick Rohn, who spurred the conversation we had the conversation with us that spurred this acronym. It's TARA, T-A-R-A. But if I really want to understand someone, truly understand them, that's the sort of the process that I go through of tolerating the person first. It's a weak virtue, and it's not going to get you very far. Tolerance, right? There's what is on the I-10 whenever we're driving and Ella's like acting crazy in the car. There's a sign that says Museum of Tolerance, and I always joke with Ella
the Robertson
that our car is the Museum of Tolerance whenever she's in the car.
The mobile museum of tolerance.
Anyway, tolerate, and then we go from there. We take these steps. Getting tolerance is a good first step, and then we move on to acceptance, respect, and then ultimately appreciation. And Ryan and I have radically different beliefs. I'm trying to let go of those beliefs. I don't think beliefs serve us very well, but that's a different conversation. We have the same values, though, and because we have the same values, when we have different beliefs, so we get there via different paths, so to speak. We have different opinions, we have different personalities, we certainly have different preferences. But I don't say, well, his preferences are right or wrong. I might think it at first, but like that's also my ego talking. And I don't want to just tolerate his preferences. That's not going to make for a good friendship, a good business relationship. By the way, it doesn't ever feel like a business. I mean, I don't think we had business paperwork until about 4 years into the thing.
I know.
Even now, we don't have, like, it's not, it's just, it's not something we think about that way. It's a business. We employ some people, but we go beyond tolerance. We accept the fact that we're both going to be different. I'm not trying to change you. It's not about here's what you must do, right? And then of course the respect thing. Of course I respect your preferences. I don't always completely understand them, but that's okay. And ultimately, if you can get to that level where you actually appreciate the idiosyncrasies, then that's like full sort of detachment, not needing to change someone.
Yeah, no, I think, and this goes for any relationship, like first off, if Josh comes to me with something, it's not accusatory. It's like, it's something he wants to talk about. And when you approach a situation like that, you can interpret it a lot differently than like, oh, Josh is trying to shame me. Like, I never feel like he's trying to shame me. And I think that is where arguments come in. When people start to try and shame other people, and that's, oh, you just shame me, now I'm going to shame you. And now we're going to trade shames back and forth.
Right.
Where I try to be the Zen Buddhist that Josh is when it comes to confrontation. But sometimes I'll go to Josh with something and he'll be like, I know you don't mean to say it that way. I think what you're trying to say is this. And I'm like, yeah, you're absolutely right.
Right.
And so it's not, when I say it's Josh, it truly is like when he comes to me, it's absolutely non-confrontational. And if I go to him and I'm like accidentally being confrontational, he's able to like process it and be like, I know Ryan's not being a jerk right now. So yeah, let's get to the root of what
that's some ninja shit though. It's hard to master that and have that kind of, presence of mind to manage.
It's really inspiring. Like, I mean, for me and my wife, like I really go out of my way to try and have that approach with her. Again, I'm not perfect, but I do better.
Yeah.
Every day I get a little better, I think.
I used to be competitive, but that's like saying I used to be mentally ill. I was doing a sauna in Montana when we lived in Montana for 5 years as a accident, and a beautiful accident.
Some nice photos from that, though.
Yes,
came out of that.
It all.
Dude,
We did it for the photos. Did it for the gram.
We did not do it for the gram.
I don't think we even had Instagram. But anyway, I was in a sauna with an American Indian named Tom, and he said, you know, I don't. And there's like a basketball court right next to the sauna. It's the YMCA in Missoula, and he ended up swimming and all this other stuff. And he goes, you know, I don't understand you Americans. Like, you have this idea of like, if in order for you to win, you have to lose. He's like, but where I come from, if you win, he wins. And if he loses, you lose. And of course, my first knee-jerk reaction to that was like, that's a silly way to think about life because I'm winning, right? And it's like, well, no.
You just haven't won enough. That's your problem.
Yeah, but even think about that. We talk about like winning. You know, obviously Charlie Sheen is sort of the parodic exaggeration of that, right? But that's it's not far off from how where our culture is, right? We talk about winning as though it's a good thing, but by default, if someone wins, someone else has to lose. Now, maybe it's a semantic thing, and we can change our language around it. But I think language is really important. I think it's a real big problem too. But I think our language, it canvases our days, right? Yeah. It's language is responsible for more misery than anything else in human history.
Well, that idea, I mean, the most successful people I know, maybe not all of them, but I know a lot of successful people who do approach the world with that idea of largesse, that, you know, it's not a zero-sum game, and if I win, you win too. And not only, you know, are you able to, you know, basically succeed in whatever it is that you're trying to do, those people tend to be much happier people and grounded and you know, more conscious in general.
You had the Tom's guy on recently, Blake.
Yeah,
right?
Blake.
He strikes me as
he's
as
definitely someone like that. I also had Karamo from Queer Eye on, and he was talking about the audition process for Queer Eye, and they were like, you know, they spent like years trying to find like the 5 dudes or whatever, or the 4 dudes that do the show. And most of the guys were super competitive, and they'd go in and audition, and then they'd come out, and the other guys would be like, what did they ask you? And they'd be like, they wouldn't say, you know, because they're like, I'm competing against you. I'm not going to tell you any secrets. But there were a couple of them that would come out and be like, here's what happened. Here's what you need to look out for. And those were the guys that ultimately all ended up getting chosen for the show, which obviously changed their lives and the lives of, you know, a lot of people that watch that show.
Interesting.
Which is cool, right?
That
like,
is
I
cool.
love that idea.
Yeah. Makes me think of like Google when they hire people, they like bring them on a bus. And then like whether or not they think the bus driver is like a huge... It's like a litmus test. Yeah.
Oh, I see. Yeah. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Like, how do you behave when no one's watching? Because in this context, there were casting people who are paying attention to this behavior, and it's like we want people that, you know, approach the world with that kind of, you know, arms outstretched perspective of gratitude and giving.
Amen.
And to reward that.
Yeah.
We were talking about Dave Ramsey earlier, but his team, they interview the spouse in one of the interviews. It's a rather rigorous process, but your spouse gets interviewed as well. Like separately.
Wow.
And it's fascinating to me because I think maybe they're like trying to figure out, well, what are your, how do you handle conflict? How do you make decisions? How do you make some of your biggest life choices? Are they congruent with the person that we want to hire? Now I can imagine that might be a train wreck for some people, but I know if you interviewed Bex, like I would totally get the job, no matter what the job was.
How do you know what she's gonna say? You think you know. Let's talk a little bit more about the movie. I mean, I came into this thinking these guys have been working on this thing for years because I know how long ago it was when I was there at that event. But you are featuring these individuals, the kind of everyday people, minimalist people that are highlighted in the movie.
Yeah.
And they're on Zoom calls. So I was like, well, clearly you're executing this project like during the pandemic.
The pandemic was the best and worst thing that happened to this film.
Yeah.
So we had this entire day set up in Los Angeles. We had a whole crew booked. We had location, and we were bringing, I don't know what it was, 22 or 32 people in to be interviewed that day. The majority of them were these everyday minimalists, right? In fact, I think it was a 2-day shoot. Early or mid-March. Of course, you know what happened.
Right at the beginning, the starting line of the whole thing.
Yeah. But the original thing that we wanted to do was, have you seen YouTube reaction videos when people sort of like react to a music video or they react to a product or service or something?
I might have seen one or two of those.
So like we kind of wanted to do that, but with minimalism in a way. Like, and so it was Chris's idea. Chris is our director of photography on the film. And so that actually worked out better by bringing us sort of into their homes in a way. In fact, we had them do some B-roll of some of their houses that shows up in the film as well. So you get to see the sort of decluttering process they went through. Some of them even had footage that they took when they simplified their life, a year or two ago. And we got to include all of that in the film, even though we filmed the rest of it in
well, it gives it in addition to this verite touch, like it's heartwarming because it's so authentic. It's like they're actually shooting it themselves and sharing it, as opposed to a sterilized film crew coming in and trying to make everything look just so.
Right. Yeah. We sent them cameras and stuff, so it looked like congruent with each one. Didn't feel like it was out of place, but it was them doing the thing on their own.
Yeah. We got most of the cameras back. Just kidding. We'll get them all back.
More stuff.
Oh,
right. Talk to me about some of the other experts that you have featured in here, because it's an interesting grouping of people. In addition to Dave Ramsey, you've got TK Coleman, who I know, he was on your podcast not that long ago. Annie Leonard from Greenpeace, Danae Barahona from Simple Families.
Yeah.
So she's kind of in, squarely in the minimalist space, it feels like. But it was intriguing, like, oh, this person from Greenpeace, like she's about sustainability. But I was interested in how you made these choices.
She did the story of stuff, if you recall. She's the lady who did that video. I mean, it's been seen probably 100 million times at this point.
It's weird because I saw her and I was like, she looks really familiar, and I couldn't point. There's an actress that looks kind of like her as well, but I couldn't put my finger on it.
Yeah. So she's an executive director of Greenpeace USA, and so we wanted sort of there are 5. We only wanted 5 experts in the film. And we wanted sort of them from these different perspectives. So one was the environmental side of things. There's obviously overlap with all of them. We wanted the economic side of things. So TK Coleman, he is an education director at FEE. We had Dave Ramsey, the sort of the money side of things, the debt especially, how it's tied to consumerism. Danae Barahona, she runs an organization called Simple Families and really focused on parenting and kids. And so we wanted to bring the family side in there as well. And then we had Erwin McManus, who is a pastor here in Los Angeles, who probably was, it's hard to pick a favorite, but he had some of my favorite lines in the entire film.
Yeah. He's an interesting dude. 'Cause wasn't he like a fashion designer or something like that? He has this whole other, he's like a designer. He does all this other stuff.
Yeah, and he still does. He just launched a new like super minimalist clothing line. He talks about intentional living in ways that they're just really profound, and I was just really grateful to have that opportunity to sit with him. He's been on our podcast a couple times too. TK has been on our podcast. I think you've been on there the second most. TK has been on there maybe like 8 times. If I can introduce you to anyone, TK, he'll blow your socks off. The best person you could speak to about just about anything, but especially like.
But I'm unclear on his so he's in education, but I'm unclear about the nexus between that and minimalism.
He was sort of our economy expert in a way, and I wanted to juxtapose. You could call him a capitalist, although that word doesn't really mean what it's taken on a pejorative frame in the last 5-10 years. But I wanted to juxtapose Annie, who has probably radically different beliefs from TK, and show that they overlap, and literally overlapped in the film together. And even though they disagreed about some things, where she talks about growth and infinite growth, and then he immediately sort of rebuts that by talking about, I don't think the problem is growth. And he goes into what he thinks the problem is. And so we wanted some opinions that we didn't want it to be like the Yes Man show, right? I wanted to learn something from these people. And Erwin, he really helped solidify the theme of the film. It's a film, as Ryan said earlier, about starting over. He has a line in there about the shaking the Etch-a-Sketch thing that Ryan talked about. But we all have the not should. There's no should. We all have the opportunity.
I like how you caught yourself there.
Here's the problem I have is, like, I keep setting these things down, like the shoulds, but I have the pattern. I pick them back up repeatedly. We all have the opportunity, though, to restart our lives, to start over. And this film was about starting over with less. And that can be less stuff, but it can also be less distractions, fewer commitments, etc.
I love that.
Yeah. What is the main idea that you want people to take away from the film?
I mean, I think Josh said it. It's about starting over. I mean, is this film for every single person? I think every single person will get something out of it. But I think who it's going to help the most is someone who's in a situation right now and they need some emotional leverage to start over. I think this film will help them do that.
Just the nudge they need.
Yeah.
I think some people, I don't think the film is for everyone, as Ryan just said, but it's for anyone who's sort of dissatisfied by the status quo, whatever status quo they've created for themselves. We're overburdened, right? And a lot of that has to do with stuff. But I think it also has to do with toxic relationships. I think it has to do with debt. There are all these burdens. We've taken them on. We've picked up all this baggage, but we can also set it down. It might take some time to set it down, especially with debt. In the first film, in Minimalism, I talked about I had almost $500,000 worth of debt. I was making $200,000 a year in Dayton, Ohio, but I was spending like $220,000 a year, like whatever they would let me spend. And so I had massive amounts of debt as a result. And I had to sort of set that burden down. It took some time, but the best way to do that is to stop spending, right? To stop whatever excess is going on. We can't add our way to contentment, to joy, to peace. It's always about subtraction.
The timing is very interesting because we're all at home, and I think with that comes a natural inclination to do a little bit of inventory, on how we're living our lives and what is our relationship to our job, to our profession. When you're not going into an office every day or into a workplace in the manner in which you're accustomed to, that interruption of the flow or the routine, I think, is triggering a lot of people to be more reflective about how they're spending their time and their resources, et cetera. So to the point about like the nudge or the kind of the gentle, push towards these ideas, I feel like people are primed for this now. And it is a moment of radical change. Everybody's like, or not everybody, but a lot of people are thinking about this in terms of when are we going to get back to the way it was? It's not going back to the way it was. No. We are forever altered. Yeah. Some things will normalize to a certain extent, but the idea that everyone's going to migrate back into office buildings, I think, is lunacy. Like, that's not going to happen. We've now figured out how to pursue livings from Zoom and these tools that we have. So what does that look like down the line? And how can we reflect on this to reform our relationship with the outside world so that it can be healthier and it can be more fulfilling and more purposeful? And the movie, really speaks to that in a profound way. And I think it's going to help a lot of people.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Normal wasn't working for a lot of us, and this gave us the opportunity to realize that. It was a forced pause for many of us, even for me and Ryan. We had a whole tour plan this year, and the film was going to come out earlier, et cetera. and we had a bunch of speaking things that we were going to do. There aren't corporations that are meeting, so we couldn't go speak at these places, and so it was a pause for us as well. But it's not to take away either what some people are faced with. My brother, he is back in Ohio. He worked in a factory, building cabinets. It was a well-paying job, and he was talented and skilled, and he was doing that. That whole thing shut down. It's not coming back. He went and got a part-time job at Amazon so he could pay, feed his daughters, and now he's working third shift at a meat packing plant because that's like his only reality right now. That's how and talk about one of the most difficult jobs you could have, and doing it third shift, no less. But so a lot of people are affected by this. And so while I don't want to go back to where we were, I also don't want to see more suffering. And so I think what's happening right now is Ryan and I for the last decade have been asking this question: what is essential? And now a lot more people are all of a sudden asking. In fact, the term's even out there: essential worker, right? But what is essential in my home? What is essential in my life? What is essential on my calendar? What is essential? And that's what I hope to illuminate with this film. Help people ask that question: what is essential?
Yeah,
I think that's a good place to put a pin in it for now until you guys come back next time.
Rich, I love you, brother. Thank you so much.
Love you guys too. I have so much love for you guys as people and respect for this mission that you've shouldered for the world. You guys are great servants to humanity, and it's a privilege to talk to you. So thank you.
Right back at you, brother.
Wind in your sails, my friends.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you so much.
Before we sign off, where's the best place for people to learn more about you guys? Where would you like them to connect? In addition to, obviously, checking out Less is More on Netflix, and also, if you didn't see it the first time around, Minimalism, the original movie.
Well, Ryan has an OnlyFans he just started.
I am so here for that.
You said you wouldn't say a word about that on Rich's podcast.
Audience supported.
That's right. So many people adore me.
Yeah.
Talk about minimalism.
All right.
Just theminimalists.com. You can find our podcast, books, films, everything else. It's all in one hub, theminimalists.com.
Nice. Cool. Thanks, you guys.
Thank you.
Peace.
See you.
Plants.